If you struggle with emotional regulation, you desperately need to know about sensory regulation. But a lot of people have no idea what their sensory needs are, and most people don't know how to manage their sensory diet to help with emotional regulation. So this is super important with children and with the neurodiverse community, which is like ADHDers and autistic folk. But anyone that doesn't understand their sensory regulation needs often struggle with emotional regulation, are one of the first things I assess for. And when kids have attention, learning, or behavior problems, they desperately need someone who can help them understand their sensory needs. Because your sensory diet directly impacts your brain's ability to process stimuli and emotions in a healthy way. So in this video, I'm going to teach you about sensory regulation and how that can relate to managing our emotions as well. And I'm going to tell you a story about a young woman who thought she might be psychotic, but when she figured out her sensory needs, she said, "Everything suddenly makes sense now. I'm not broken. I just had all these needs that I didn't have words for." Okay, real quick, if you'd like to learn more about how to process and regulate emotions, check out my How to Process Emotions online course. It's got 30 video lessons teaching fundamental skills that no one ever taught you about how to work through difficult thoughts and feelings and how to know what to do with them. And this can be super helpful not only with depression or anxiety, but also in helping you live a rich and meaningful life. So check out the link in the description if you want to learn more. Okay, so my friend and fellow therapist Lindsay recently told me about one of her clients. She was a 16-year-old girl. She was super intelligent. She attended a prestigious private school, but she wasn't living up to her potential. She was actually getting into tons of trouble with the teachers. She couldn't focus. She was always squirming in her seat, and she wondered if she was psychotic because she just felt like her skin was like crawling. She felt like ripping off all of her clothes. Certain types of fabrics would drive her crazy, and she often felt anxious and irritable. She had a hard time sleeping. She couldn't get comfortable in her bed. She had no problem doing homework at home, but when she was at school, she couldn't even hear what the teachers were saying. She couldn't focus on her work, and she was always fidgeting in class. She was just constantly getting in trouble because it seemed like she was being rude. It seemed like she wasn't paying attention, and so she would just keep getting in trouble. And this led to her feeling really stressed and depressed. So her doctor started her on an antidepressant, but that didn't really seem to help much. Eventually, she switched schools. She got a neuropsych eval, and she got diagnosed with ADHD. And thanks to that, they were able to help her get some really helpful tools. And one of these tools was the right medication, but the other is that when you see someone who specializes in ADHD, they're also going to help you develop sensory regulation. So Lindsay worked with her to help her regulate her sensory needs. And as they did, things just started clicking into place. So with the sensory assessment, they found out that she was hypersensitive to touch, but sensory seeking with vestibular and proprioceptive. More on those later. So when those needs were met, she didn't feel jittery all the time. She was able to focus better. Her grades went up. But the best part was she wasn't getting chewed out by the teachers all the time anymore. So her stress levels went down and she was healthier and happier. So there were 3 main points to her treatment plan. One was getting an accurate diagnosis. She wasn't truly depressed or psychotic. She had ADHD and unmet sensory needs. Number 2 was getting her on the right meds. And number 3 was balancing her sensory diet. Okay, so let's back up and talk about what the heck are sensory needs. All of us are familiar with our 5 senses: sight, touch, hearing, smell, and taste. We also have 2 additional senses that are not always highlighted: vestibular and proprioceptive. So vestibular relates to our sense of balance and movement. So as I lean over, I can tell that I'm leaning. That's my proprioceptive movement. That's my vestibular sense. And proprioceptive relates to knowing where our body is in relation to the environment. It's our sense of groundedness. It's our sense of self and space with our body. We interact with the world around us with our 7 senses at every moment. So sensory processing is how we're able to interpret and react to the stimuli we receive from the world around us. Now, when processing the stimuli through our senses, we generally can have either positive or negative reactions to these things. So, for example, have you ever seen something that was so captivating that you can't stop looking at it? Or do you prefer a certain texture when you choose a snack? And on the other hand, have you ever been at a concert and the volume was just too loud? Or have you felt the tag on your clothing feel like too scratchy on your neck? So if you crave the feeling of a crunchy snack, or you hate the sound of a loud concert, these positive or negative reactions to your sensory experience can be understood as either sensory seeking or sensory avoiding behaviors. When we're seeking sensory input, we enjoy and we want more stimuli to that sense. Sensory seeking may look like someone wanting frequent physical touch, or gravitating towards certain scents, or smelling food closely, or touching the wall while walking down a hallway, or spinning around or swinging a lot. When we're avoiding sensory input, we're overwhelmed by and we want less input to that sense. So sensory avoiding may look like covering one's ears when things are too loud, or using sunglasses to avoid bright light, or avoiding eating certain textures of food, or like being really sensitive to rides at an amusement park. Now, one thing to note is that no person is entirely sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. We might enjoy and seek input to one sense while avoiding input to another sense. So when we're constantly out of our sensory comfort zone, it takes mental and emotional labor to regulate ourselves. If we don't know how to manage our sensory needs, this can lead to anxiety, meltdowns, and exhaustion. So let me give you an example. So let's imagine it's at the end of a stressful workday. You transition back into your home and you're prepping dinner in the kitchen. You're cutting vegetables and you're cooking on the stove. The hood vent is on and your family is in the next room watching TV. And the kids are trying to talk to you and ask you for things. Like, there is a lot of sensory stimuli going on. Plus, you're trying to read the recipe. Now, do you feel a sigh of relief when you turn off the hood vent? Or do you get frustrated when your partner or kids try to talk to you over all of that environmental noise? This sensory overwhelm creates a perfect storm for your brain to shut down a little bit. Sensory overload impacts and exacerbates your emotional state. So like maybe you'll snap at your partner or your kids. Now, to be honest, this is the time I'm most likely to blow up at the kids. Or maybe like you just are so sick of it after all that stimulation that dinner doesn't taste good even after you put so much work into it. So when our sensory needs are not in balance, it can just be harder to regulate our emotions. With the 7 senses, we all have our comfort zones, and we may need to add in or reduce sensory stimuli for our brains to regulate. So with the cooking example, you might be better regulated if you can ask your partner and kids to go play in another room while you cook, which, taking away that extra sound stimuli can help you feel calmer inside. Or if you're sensory seeking, you might do best with a lot of music playing in the background while you cook. With each of the 7 senses, we can modify our environment to create an optimal sensory diet, and this can help us regulate our emotions. So with the client I mentioned earlier, she didn't know it, but she was a proprioceptive seeker. With therapy and education, she learned that for her nervous system to feel soothed, she needed more deep pressure. So they added things into her sensory diet, like weighted blankets and compression clothes. So they're kind of like snug clothing that have a very specific texture for her. And when they added these things in, she was finally able to relax. She realized that she didn't have hallucinations. She didn't have bugs crawling over her body. She just needed more deep touch to feel safe. And as she met that sensory need, she was able to get emotionally regulated too. So now she's doing great at a very prestigious university, doing a graduate degree. Okay, so let's talk about how you can integrate sensory regulation with your emotional regulation. First thing you want to do is start by taking an inventory. You can learn what sensory experiences are positive or negative for you, and you can just kind of raise your awareness around what you find calming or overwhelming. And this could be as simple as writing down a list of activities that you enjoy and activities or sensory experiences that you avoid. Or you can check out my other video where you can take a little quiz to see what your sensory needs are. Then once you have a good awareness of your sensory needs, you can create an individualized plan called a sensory diet. So a sensory diet is a group of activities that you engage in to balance out your sensory needs. So you balance that interplay of needing alerting activities to keep you engaged and organized in your daily activities, as well as taking breaks when you're feeling overloaded. You might find that you're already doing some of this naturally, like if you're getting drowsy at work, you maybe take a short walk. Or if you know you've got some busy, loud event coming up, you plan some time in afterwards for yourself to recharge. Like these are ways we kind of naturally have learned to regulate ourselves, but with a little bit more intentionality, you can develop an even better plan. So you gain some self-awareness about all the areas where you are sensory seeking or sensory avoiding, and then you build those needs into your day. I am going to talk about a ton more options for interventions and accommodations in the other video I'm making, but here's some examples. If someone is taste and smell sensory seeker, they might be able to study longer or work harder if they have some Sour Patch Kids or spicy chips to eat while they study. If someone is a proprioceptive or vestibular avoider, they may hate long car rides, roller coasters, or walking on uneven ground. And they may benefit from doing other activities that are more solid, maybe walking with more supportive shoes, or holding handrails while they walk, or avoiding long car trips or carnival rides. If someone's an auditory seeker, they may feel calmest doing computer work in a busy coffee shop or with background music on at home. But an auditory avoider may love the quietest environment possible. If someone's a visual avoider, they may work best or feel calmest in like minimalist environments. Whereas for a visual seeker, soothing activities might include like hunting for shells on the beach, or walking through an exciting mall, or covering their walls with posters. Okay, so there's a few examples. Let me give you an example of a sensory diet for like a 9-year-old kid. So she's a sensory seeker with proprioception, touch, and vestibular, but she's an avoider with sound. She has some symptoms of ADHD and anxiety and some rude behaviors, mostly at home. So we add in big movements and lots of hugging to her day. So morning is a gentle wake up with lots of like back rubs and hugs and cuddling. And then as she's getting ready for school, a little bit of roughhousing helps her feel like more regulated. During school, we work with the school to make sure she can get physical activity. So we make sure she gets recess. We make sure she can take a break if she really needs to in class and like go for a walk if she's getting fidgety. But she's also like an auditory avoider. So she has requested being able to use earplugs to dampen the noise of assemblies. And that's an accommodation that, we work with our teachers to decide when that is and isn't appropriate. The other thing to know about this kid is if there's a fire alarm, that unexpected alarm can be quite alerting or frightening for her. So she often needs some extra time after a fire alarm to relax afterwards and get re-regulated, something quiet or soothing for her. So she goes to school, and after school, she needs time to decompress. So after school, she either takes some quiet time in her own room, like sometimes up to 30 or 45 minutes. It's her choice. Or if she wants, she can go run around and play outside and move her body and roughhouse. Near bedtime, she wants lots of roughhousing, lots of stretching. You see her doing a lot of like tumbling type play. She's doing a lot of cartwheels. And that can help her kind of get soothed and regulated before bed. And she's also in a gymnastics class and a dance class each week. So as we adapt to her sensory needs, her anxiety goes down and she's visibly calmer and her rude behaviors also decrease. So that's an example of a sensory diet. So as you become aware of your sensory comfort zone and the sensory experiences that you seek and avoid, then you can structure your environment and your schedule to support that emotional regulation. So typically, if we're sensory avoiding, any emotional trigger is going to be felt far more keenly. And if we're sensory seeking, we might be less reactive to emotional triggers. Now, if you or a loved one really struggle with balancing your sensory needs, occupational therapists are the skilled clinicians to help really target the right balance of seeking and avoiding activities that are going to help you regulate your emotions. And, in addition to that, people with an ADHD or an autism diagnosis, they can have these ongoing sensory needs that are sometimes require even more accommodations or tailored interventions so that they can learn how to manage them. So that's about it. If you do want to learn more about specific ways to manage your sensory needs, I really like the book, A Buffet of Sensory Interventions, because it's just got a bunch of lists. I wonder if I've got it right here. I don't know where it is. It's got a big list of here's a ton of interventions you can use if you're an auditory seeker. Here's a ton of interventions you can use if you're an auditory avoider. And it's just got lots of great ideas. It's pretty cheap and it's on Amazon. So check that out. And also check out my other video if you want to do the little quiz to understand your individual sensory needs. The link is in the description. If it's not out yet, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you're notified when it does come out. I'm going to publish it within a few weeks of this video. So hope that's helpful. Thank you for watching and take care.